I try to do every morning, big cup of coffee, and then, and this is something I don't know how many other people do. I have to look around the shop. There's about 20 projects going on at once here, and I don't even know which one I want to work on. It's true. And it's that beautiful time of year. The leaves are turning, may even sneak in another few flying days, you never know. But trying to figure out what project to work on first is really a major problem. We got so many things to do here. But the first thing, you always have a cup of coffee. That's mandatory. And figure out what to do. The first thing is feed the bird. He prefers being fed. Feed me, feed me. Hey, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. Feed me. One of the things that's unique around this part of the country, every morning I get up, I feed the fish and take care of all the things out in the yard. And we're just coming up on Halloween very soon too. The neighbors have already decorated. They've got pumpkins and God knows what else. They just put about, well, I don't even know, a lot of money into fixing up their house. And it's beautiful. It's really added to our property value, so we're encouraging them to spend some more money. Early in the morning like this, and it's not even sunrise yet. It's just a great time of the year. It's crisp. The air is crisp and dry. They're predicting some nice weather for the first game of the World Series. Again, we'll find out. Go Yankees. I'm not really a big baseball fan, but boy, my kids are. It's their life hinges around what happens to these sports teams. It's the time of year that 93 Elliott Place is a great place to be. You know, I always say this, some days it's fun to be windy, some days it's no fun at all. Well, the building season is my favorite time of year. I would much rather, if I had to give up one and not the other, I'd certainly give up flying before building. I love having my friends over. I love having a lot of projects to work on, a lot of diversified things to experiment with. And this time of year, 93 Elliott Place is a great place to be alive. Times early in the morning like this, it's nice and quiet in the neighborhood, and I often wonder, you know, I had never met Karen, and she had never been the person she is. Would we ever have had this life we've had? I mean, she gets most of the credit for the stuff that we've done, and really for making our family a very special part of my life anyway. So, we hope you enjoy sharing it with us, but most of all, hope you enjoy sharing the modeling adventures and railroad adventures, and maybe even see the Yankees win a few games in the World Series. Let's go down to shop this morning and get to work. And one of the things before I get started on doing some work, I've had this is a 1/48 inch plastic scale model of an Invader, an A26 of course. Mike Costello brought this over, and I just put it on the back burner and just was cleaning out some stuff and just happened to find it. And I said, whoa, maybe this would be a good time to check it out, since we're kind of moving along on our A26 project. And when we start actually making up, look at the details on it. I don't know if it comes this way or Mike had done some work on it. Look at this, it shows the doors and everything. Wow. That is really detailed. Now, since sooner or later we're going to have to make a fuselage plug. Look, this is the wings. I guess that's the first wing spur, the front one. Yeah, nice, that goes together. I'm going to have to ask Mike. I'm sure he worked on this. He did some work on this. He was playing. This couldn't come from the factory this way. One of the things I really wanted to come up with, though, and I'm really disappointed. I've got 100 wheels here.
The ones that are heavy look good. The ones that are light don't look good, wear out. But now this will be handy because I want to come up with some. I was even thinking about molding my own carbon fiber wheel hubs. But I'm glad Mike did all this work. Wow, this is really pretty neat. This is the first time I've ever opened a box. Shows you what I know. The one thing nice that we have, for instance, talk about things you have. There's the wingtip shape. We're going to be making up a tip weight box soon. This is another thing that's critical, is I need to know when I lay out the nacelles just how much. Now on a B25, a very little bit goes over the top. You can see it much more goes over the top here. We can also get a really accurate inking thing off of this. So I guess for $8-10 or whatever this cost, this is well worth it. I guess Monogram is the manufacturer. If you were going to make even a P51 or a Spitfire or something, look at the little props and everything. I may have to just take a break in the course of building this. And the nice thing that I've evolved into is that no part of any project I'm working on this year has to be done on a schedule, like to be to a certain contest at a certain day. We are just cruising and enjoying every minute of working on this stuff. I'm blown away by this fuselage build. Wow. Now Walt Brownell, of course, I'd be willing to bet he's built a lot of these. I haven't really built a lot of plastic models, but one of the nice things this does, this shows you all the shapes. Here's the canopy. When we actually start carving up that plug, I'm thinking it's going to really be to our advantage to have this at some point in time. Here's the glass window in the back. Has all the detailing on the window. Absolutely an excellent investment. I'm sorry I didn't open this up sooner. But it just shows you a lot of times you have so many projects going on. What is this? Maybe somebody else worked on this, I don't know. A free catalog. Oh, fish in $3. Guess what? We won't be sending for it. We'll get free catalogs. Get them off the internet. Look at this. The engines? Wow. So just looking at this would be a cool thing to make a mold for. If you could put this around the engine somehow, so when you look in the front, you wouldn't see the engine. You'd see this, the radial cylinders. Anyway, as always, I'm impressed and amazed. This will be handy to have, the decals. This is quite a nice model. And since we haven't really committed to which version we want to build, I mean, the A26, the Invader, is a very attractive model. I like this shape, and I think this is what we're going to wind up doing, is the Bombardier nose. When it comes to a point, it'll just look a little slicker. This big window, and I like to fog the windows in, as I've done. Quite a nice paint job on that, too, by the way. Anyway, just one little surprise that greets me here halfway through a cup of coffee, and I'm already excited about working on something. But first thing I want to do today is I want to lay out the outboard tip. The outboard tip is one of the only places on the whole plane that I don't care how much it weighs. It can just be whatever it is. We'll hollow it out incrementally, but the method that we've used in the past to make tip weight boxes has been bulletproof. We've never had a problem with it. We have it on all the planes, and I would suggest no matter what plane you're doing it, or what model you're making, this will be an excellent way to do it. This is a way that I've used over the years. Now these we cut when we did the inner tip. These are the heavier of the two blocks. They're 21 and 20. The only reason for using relatively light wood here would be one reason: it's easier to carve and sand. The other thing is it just makes the hollowing operation, and we will do some hollowing for the simple reason is I'd like to get the tip weight in the plane as far forward as possible. So from maybe the high point of the wing back, we'll try to hollow it out, make the box up here. But this is a real simple way of making a tip weight box that works on any design, Cardinal, SV11, the design of your choice, Impact, whatever. And it results in what I think is a really efficient, it's a self-aligning way of making a tip weight box. So we'll get this made, get it hollowed and shaped, and maybe then move on to one or the other projects in the shop. The problem is we've got so many projects, and Les has been working alongside of me, and we're looking forward to just an endless adventure this winter. This is a step that hardly even matters, but we'll take every advantage we can. The heavier of the two pieces, when this becomes a wingtip, this part will be supporting the weight. So if we have a variance in weight, we'd like the heavier of the two to be on top. Also, that gives us another thing. This piece would be the part you see when the model is on its landing gear, so the heavier wood would just be a little less vulnerable to somebody coming along and hitting it or picking it up by the wingtip or whatever. So we'll start by just tack gluing these together, get them on a perfectly flat surface, of which we have plenty in the shop. A couple of tacks of glue here, and then we'll be ready to lay out our outboard tip and make a tip weight box. Things I can suggest is, put these on a surface and hold them together, is always make always make a tip slightly bigger, 1/8 of an inch or so, bigger than what you think you need. When it's undersized, you really have to make the whole part over. When it's a little bit oversized, there's really nothing bad happens. So a few drops of CA. Now we have one block. This now becomes our center line for the whole project. That's going to be our self-aligning center line. No matter what we do, everything that we do with the hatch and with the cover and with everything is going to reference off the center. So, of course, what we want to do now is trace the wing outline on here. We have the wing over here. Let's get the wing over here. And, of course, I want to use the actual wing that we're going to be using. See, some of the foam is missing up here, which won't mean anything. We want to just pin this on or tape it on and trace out that edge. So we have a starting point and we can get rid of a lot of the rough material before we even attach this to the wing. The idea here is to carry that center line. See, this is not even really perfectly straight. You want to maintain that center line. Where these little pins work great. John Patia, thank you. Now we can really make sure we have this exactly. And leave the line on at all times. A little bit oversized. You can see how this whole thing is about 1/8 of an inch oversized. Always better to have a little bit of extra material on there, if possible. I'm going to run out of room here. This is the problem here. Now we have the choice of just getting rid of a lot of this material with the Dremel saw, cut it before we even start to shape the part. Just a certain amount of this that we know we can get off. I don't want to get too cute though. Always, I would guess it's good to leave an extra 1/8 of an inch. Like I said, just that much less, you have to carve and sand away. Every little bit you can get off. This makes the job go quicker, easier. Now the next step is I want to get this surface perfectly flat, running on a sanding block, and get this temporarily tack glued with some 5-minute epoxy, tack glued in place. Actually, one of the things I could do, I could take some of this material off. Maybe I'll do that too. Either way, because the wing is in halves, it's still easy to handle. Once it's a one-piece wing, it gets, in this shop anyway, with the low ceiling, difficult to handle. I'll take some of this off with the rough knife, just rough it into position, but always leaving that extra little bit. Want to make sure that's flat, because if those aren't exactly flat, it can be a problem when you join it up. You won't get a nice joint. The objective, if we're going to do some of this rough carving, the objective is to just get some of the material removed easily. And once this is tack glued, it just gets a little bit more difficult to handle. Again, if you had a nice big shop with a 12-foot ceiling, or if you're building smaller models, if you're building 40-size planes, smaller planes, not a problem. In my case, we're building relatively large models in a very confined space. They're the first comment everybody makes when they come from somewhere else. They've seen a video, possibly of the shop, and then they actually physically show up here. They say, oh my God, it looks bigger on video. Well, you know what? It's an optical illusion. It isn't that big, guys. It's a small shop area. If I ever hit the lottery, or if somebody dies and leaves me their life-saving, which obviously is not going to happen, especially my family. I'm the richest one in my family, so they're waiting for me to die. But anyway, what I had thought about doing is investing some of that money in the garage, of having my Kajeski sheetrock it all out, insulate it. But you're talking about, in our case, just too much money. Just too many other things I want to do with that money. And then there's the thing we always like, that college tuition loan. Oh man. Anyway, I think you can get the picture. Try to get one side. This is just a rough carving. Then we will tack it in place and then get the final shaping of the outer skin. Of course, I want to get the back lined up. This is our center line. And get some tape, pressing and tension, 5-minute epoxy, or even alphatic. This is 5-minute. That's going to take 10 or 15 minutes to harden up. We'll go do some other work and then come back to this. Once this is hard, we can put the final shaping, the final outer shaping on the tip. Here's something that came in today's mail that I sent away for, again, on the internet, free. Boy, do I love the internet. Learning how to get a lot of stuff off the internet for free. Anyway, there's a reason I want to show this. I think I mentioned earlier that just not real happy about the wheels on the B25. Never been real happy with them. And it turns out, let me shut some of the background lights off. It turns out Dubro makes up some really nice wheels that are scale for B25. Let's see if they're in their new catalog. They're out on the internet. Let me just see what, these are all different things, Dubro Racing. What I'm interested in is the wheels. But never be afraid to just go out on the internet, and when it says send me a free catalog, sign up. I want to find out where the wheels are. Now the B25 and the A26, again, never happy with the wheels. I've wanted to mold my own hubs and everything, but it turns out they had some, and we've always had the choice of using, what is the name of the wheels, the real heavy ones. They're real scale, the scale guys use them, but the trouble is they weigh more than the airplane. So when I heard that Dubro made these wheels, first thing I did, I called up Brodax, and they didn't have them in stock. So here's the deal, John. I know John is watching this video right now. Here's their wheels. Look, they don't even put them in here. So maybe they're not available unless you got to buy them off the website. I wanted to buy them from John. There they are. These would be relatively scale for a B25. Now they come in 2.5, 2 3/4, and 3. Well, we need 2.5. But look at the tread. Now, it would be neat to have the tread. The only thing that's wrong is I don't like the hubs. The hubs don't do it for me. So I'm still going to think about getting some of these wheels with these, what I call a World War II diamond pattern. They call them diamond pattern. Look at the weight now. The weight is pretty good, 9.6 grams. But I still need to come up with a better hub. I'm just not happy. I think I'm going to try to take some of those wheels that have the scale hub and somehow marry this wheel up to that hub or something in the near future. But anyway, everybody always likes free. Dubro catalog, it's free. You can just get it right off the internet. It just couldn't be any easier than that. Let's just see, do we have a... no, it's dubro.com, I'm sure. See if they have it. Dear lucky customer, buy some wheels. Okay, here. Visit our website. Now, thanks to John Poppy, I'm getting more and more comfortable with doing stuff like this, but very productive. And you never know when you're going to find something you just can't live without. Hopefully one of our future projects is getting some more scale-like lightweight wheels for this bomber. And of course we'll have them for the A26 then too. Those diamond tread wheels would really look nice on here. I don't know. Kind of looking forward. That I'm going to try to get in between some of the projects where some of the stuff is drying, or where Les is out giving gun lessons or something. Now that we have this great idea for wheels, I'm dying to have some nice wheels. Anyway, now I can put a piece of tape on here. The 5-minute is dried already. And I can get the last little shaping in. Again, I call it ice shavings. And then when I finally get very near or very close to the tape, we'll finish it all up with some sanding blocks. And this is what you should be trying. It's just for a nice, by having that amount off when you start, just having little ice shavings and get that final shape before you even go to sanding. For the last little bit, we get right up to the tape, to where we actually are touching the tape. And we'll square off the amount we've left extra on the leading and trailing edges. I want the block in final rough form before I start laying out the box. The part of it that'll be the box that the lead weights actually get held in. Now the next step here is going to be carefully cut the tip off, and then we're going to start building that, what amounts to be the box that's going to hold the tip weight. Notice I want to really be careful I don't take a chunk out of this. Just get the extra little bits of glue off of there. Now, the next step is going to be to split this block along the little glue joint that we tack glued. because this whole system depends on this joint being straight and 90 degrees, the whole thing works off of this joint in the wood. And to get it accurate right now, worth a few extra minutes. That joint is going to be the self-aligning feature that we use. Now, to be really honest, it's been at least a few times that I've been on camera and talking and yapping and made the tip weight box on the wrong side of the wing. I know everybody I've ever met has done that once. So I want to be real careful now. Envision this. And I want to trace out where the box is going to be. Now, it's really, I think it's a critical thing on all models, but a lot of people disagree. I want the tip weight as far forward as possible. I don't want, almost every time I've not cared about it, I wind up at the end of trimming the plane, cutting out all the tip weight and shoving it up in the front of the wing. So I want to allow for the fact that maybe an ounce or two of the weight, maybe an ounce will be glued up in the front, and then we'll have the variable part back here. But you would never want to make the tip weight here, and you don't want to have it in the foam wing. You want it as far out to the tip as possible and as far forward within reason. Now, if you bring it right up to the front, you're going to have a very awkward looking box. So I would want to have it maybe this far away, and I'll trace out where I want the box to be as the next step. Now, I always like to have at least 1/4 of an inch here of separation. Remember, this is an all 90-degree angles. At times I've made a fancy, put a curve in there, but I don't want to do that this time. I want to keep this simple. Now notice, when I go to the Dremel saw and cut this, I lay this flat. This is going to be exactly 90 degrees, and I can run the saw blade right around here and out one side. But what it'll establish is everything here is going to make me an absolutely perfect hatch. And the bottom of that hatch is going to rest right on my bottom piece at exactly 90 degrees, which gives me a lot of nice features, because if I didn't do it that way, boy, I would have a lot of things happening here that wouldn't be in my favor. A lot of angles and things like that. I'm also going to hollow out all of this material up here so that I can glue some of the tip weight up in the front. We'll never need less than an ounce. So ultimately I'll just wind up gluing some in there. And then I'll have the bolt out here where I can bolt in the part of it that'll be variable. Just to go over to the saw, and we're going to come right through here, go right around the corners, and have a really, that step alone makes this whole system work, and it works so nice because you've got that, everything is 90 degrees to start with. Let me get the phone. Here, you get the saw blade about 3/4 of the way through, and then you realize, oh, that's the top. Oh! No, it's not. It better not be. Anyway, we just patch where the saw blade goes through, and this gives you a real nice, if you're real careful in the corners, the trick is to use a brand new blade and go really slow, get to the corner and make a real nice 90-degree turn. Make sure the bird is in his cage when you do this. If you go too far, you can line the edge with 64th plywood, because let's face the fact, this is a tip weight box. It can be heavy. It doesn't have to be the lightest part on a model. Sometimes I wish I was building models that for a class or an event that they didn't have to be so light. It would be a lot more fun. Well, it would be a lot less of a challenge too. The challenge is getting the corners, just get the blade to go right around the corner. And like I said, if you cut too much away, 64th plywood is your friend. So now what we've accomplished is we have a really, once we square off these edges, a really nice fit. And when it's done, and the edges are all squared off, that should be a nice box, cap, whatever you want to call it. It's already got the right curve in, and it's already 90 degrees. And we already have a base that it'll sit flat on, so it won't sit up like this or down. It'll sit right in place.
What we do is just get a rough, just take some of the saw blade cuts out. Just square up some of these edges too. Now I just get a piece of scrap, put it in here so that this is together too. Now all that little piece does and will sand it flush. Just seals out the place where we put the saw cut in, just a little sliver, and we'll sand that flat. Now the next step is to just get these two pieces lined up. Make a rough tracing of where the box actually is going to reside. Now what we need to do, we need to have a hole drilled through this hatch. Now because this hatch is a flat 90 degrees, when we put this in the drill press, we can drill our hole right there. It'll give us an exact 90 degree angle down into this piece. So the first thing is I can do two things at once here. I need to put a piece of 1/8 inch plywood. I need to notch out a piece here and notch out the equivalent piece here so that when I drill that hole, this will be in place. It'll hold the hatch. This piece will be 90 degrees and I can just transpose the line down into this and put the hole for the blind nut. Everything, the way this works, everything lines the other piece up, and if you've ever tried to make a hatch and put a hatch in, boy, it can just make you crazy after a while. This way is really a nice self-aligning way. We're not really concerned a lot with weight. We can just randomly take a cut here, roughly 1/8 of an inch. Doesn't have to be exact, of course, but we would like it to be flush with the bottom when we're done. Just makes for a little bit nicer installation. Need 2 pieces of plywood this size. We have a little piece of plywood in there. That's going to be our way of confining, holding the bolts from going out the bottom. We'll drill our pilot hole here. The pilot hole is a 120 hole. Now we have our piece of plywood with the pilot hole. We know that needs to line up accurately with that. And what we want to do now is put the same piece of plywood down in here. I want to take a piece of this material out so that I'll have a little shelf that the plywood will just rest right against. Know the dimension is here, so we want this little shelf to come out roughly to there. And again, we just want to take out the same amount of material, so we'll have, in essence, a piece of 1/8 inch plywood and 1/8 inch plywood, and that'll mount that nice and solid. You basically can put 2 Zona saw cuts and then just chip out the middle. Grind it or sand it until it's 1/8 of an inch. We're going to go past the box on both sides, because this is going to be our little mount that we're going to use. And we want to get this in as level as possible. lay out this piece of plywood. And once that's cut, that'll fit right in that slot, and we'll want it to be perfectly level when we're done. Now with this piece temporarily out of the way, we can mark off, we want to leave a little bit of a ledge here, and this will just be a support for the block. So when it sits, it tends to sit nice and straight. This is not a real accurate, doesn't have to be accurate. This is going to be our little shelf. And of course it'll sit on that back plywood. So it gives us a nice firm area for this to sit in. Thing we could do is take and hollow out an area here where we're going to actually put the bolt. We always want to have the weight held in with a bolt. Many times I've seen people wrap it with Kleenex and tissue, and what happens from vibration, it'll wear a hole in a wing. I've actually seen people that the tip weight has worn a hole out, and in the middle of a flight it's flown out and hit somebody in the head. Make sure I don't make this too thin because I have to put that piece of plywood in there. That should give us, we want to get some of the material out in the front here too eventually. That should give us a reasonable amount of room. Next thing, I just want to put a little mark on this piece so I know exactly where this is, because we're going to have to take this out again. We're going to hold this piece in place, and we have a good alignment for it. And get this right in position, and just take a piece of sharpened music wire, and that'll give me exactly where I want to have. By running the music wire down, I'll pick up a nice little point exactly where I want to have the blind nut. Now when I pull this out, because it's 1/8 of an inch and that's a 125, I have the exact location. Right there is where I want to drill for my 440 blind nut. That lines up my hatch in one nice operation. I just want to make sure. I'm going to put the blind nut in place. We glue this in. I always put a drop or two of old chain lube, Pj1 Chain Lube, into the blind nut, because I really don't want to have the glue stick in the blind nut or lock in there in some way. Now I can see the blind nut in place. And what's nice, the chain lube gives it a little bit of lubrication in there, so you just don't wind up, as can happen, that you wind up putting a little bit of CA in there, and then you got to put the blind nut in and you got to re-tap it. Okay, now our little hatch we know is going to fit right in place. Now, the real key to this whole operation is, I'm going to bolt the hatch in place. I want to open this hole up to a 135 so that the head of the bolt will slide right down there. But it'll leave me a little bit better access, but I don't want to drill through the bottom. I just want to drill up to the plywood. Now what this does, it's going to allow us, it's a 250, not a 150, allow us to put a piece of aluminum tubing in there, which will give us a nice lip and an edge ultimately, and a real nice fit. When this is done, the bolt head will be centered perfectly. This is where this whole piece starts to come together as a unit. This is holding the hatch in place. Now we actually use the hatch, and I'm just getting it right in position. We have all our 90-degree angles just the way we want them. And that hatch now, see, we can do this. We can favor one side, the other, wherever we want. We can get the hatch lined up absolutely perfect. This edge is perfect. And boy, I don't think you get much better of a fit than that. That's real nice. Now we can just tack glue this together.
before I even tack it, I want to take some of the material out of here. I just want to take some. This will just be a hollowing operation. Take some of the material out because, again, we're trying to get the weight as far forward in the plane as possible. And this is really one of the steps that's a little bit of overkill, but I'd rather have it than not have it. And we're not trying to go crazy here, but we would like to get just some of that weight out of there. The theory, of course, is that 80% or more of any model is behind the center of gravity, so you'd like to get as much of the weight in front of the center of gravity, just especially a scale model, so it contributes to having the CG where you want it. Roughly what we want to take out of there. Okay, so we got one side roughed out. I'll do the same thing to the other side. And just put a couple of tacks on this. Make sure we have it nice and square. And for only tacking it is I want to take the block out. And believe me, I've done this. I've run the whole seam, both sides, went to take the block out, and thanks to the capillary action of the CA, there's no way. See how nice that comes in and out too? Now I could run the whole glue seam front to back. Now I can even run some of the glue seams in here. Now I can, just by hardening this up, this will make this a lot more durable. And the only thing left to do here, other than the final sanding, is to make up a little piece of wood with a bolt sticking in it, so the tip weight can sit in. And boy, I would never make a tip weight box where the thing isn't nice and solid. There's really, we'll do the same thing to the hatch. Really, an accident waiting to happen. Once that wood is hardened up, you can even hear it. It'll give us some real nice edges to work off. An ordinary Bud McKnight sanding stick, nail file with a sharp corner, lets you get in all these nice corners. So you see how one step lines up the next step, one step lines up the next step, and in the end, there's no part of it that you have to be a machinist for, but you wind up with something that's pretty much a machine shop kind of thing where everything fits really nice. That's really a nice pro way to do it. And this is just a 632 bolt. I ground the head off so it would sit flatter. A blind nut. You really can't make it totally tight because there's a little bit of a shoulder on this bolt, but the glue will fill that in. And that's just going to get glued in. I think I got it backwards. Now we left this so we can hollow a little bit of this out when we actually go to trim the plane, and we can just put some lead in there. In fact, maybe I'll hollow a little bit of that out right now. So we'll have a place to put the lead up front. Here's the last, one of the last little pieces. Everything is the last piece here. Need to know. We need to hollow this out, of course, so we have a little extra room for lead weights. Okay, now we want to make sure we have enough. If it takes the impression of the bolt, you take a little more out of there, just a tad more. Best thing is to cut a piece of this aluminum tube and just tack glue it in. And that really protects the bolt as you go in there with an Allen key. You don't wind up chewing this up and making it real ratty after years go by. And when that's sanded nice and flush, that'll make a nice little detail touch. So even though you can just leave it sticking up just ever so slightly, because it's really soft aluminum, you can get it flush in just a few swipes of the sanding block. Now once that's done, take a little radius out of that. Anyway, we finished this up tonight. Stayed up a little later than we thought we would, but I wanted to finish this step. Kind of an important step, but from this point on, now that we have the edges all sealed with CA, every time we sand it, break the corner so we don't wind up with a sharp corner where the paint is going to buff right off as soon as you touch it. Now, that's really it for the tip weight box, except for trying to find I think we got a little bit of glue, no we don't, a bit of glue and a bolt. Now I like to tighten a bolt because if something warps or twists, that's about as tight as we'd normally make it. And now if any of the edges are uneven, I can just sand that side. Now, it looks like we got a little bit bigger gap here than here. We can just sand that side so it tips down in that. That we probably do. We probably have a little drop of glue there or something. But that's why you have to be able to adjust this son. You know, when I was CAing this, I probably got a gloop of glue because it fit real nice the first time I put it in. Well, what I may do, because this gap is, well, probably not bigger than we really want, but if I'm not happy with the gap, of course I can just line this with little pieces of 64th plywood. But for right now, I would say that's a tip weight box that's done. And if we have to, we can make little adjustments to the hatch cover. We can also grind out some more up here if we want to put the weight even further up. But for right now, that's all we're going to do tonight. It's time to retire and see what the weather's like tomorrow. See, we just went through a big rainstorm here, but what happened is Mike and I decided to come out this morning. I had made some changes to the slop ratio. I have a bunch of little shims that I can either add slop or take slop away or put slop in. I wanted to find out if he felt it was better. Now usually if I get 3 or 4 people to fly the plane, they each can tell me, is it better or is it worse? And since we can make the change right at the field, it's really nice and easy to do that. Now we started out with really a hole that was much bigger than 1/8 of an inch because it's worn. And I had made a little bushing at a copper tubing to take some of the slop out. So what I can do right now is take some slop out, just loosen the wheel collar, put some slop back in. I can go back and forth. And what we're going to do, I'm not going to record a lot of our flights today because basically it's, well, you can tell by how we're dressed. It's cold out here and it's wet. But I can get some initial feedback. Now remember, the plane has flown for 2 full years and it started with having a nominal amount of slop, an 1/8 inch hole, a 3/32 wire. We had over the course of the time worn that out to where we replaced the bushing. And so we've taken about, I'd say, a half of the amount of slop out now. It looks like it's overturning. So maybe Mike is going to tell me he liked it better the other way. But to be able to vary it right at the field here is an amazingly good thing. It's very easy to do too. You
you're one 440 screw away from being able to get in there and move it and change it.
I said, shit, look at what a beautiful day.
Well, go get your plane. Now, Mike and I only have about an hour. Mike's got to get back. He's going to South Jersey, but I figured I'd get a couple. I changed the elevator slop on this. I wanted to see if Mike liked it better. It looks like he's overturning it. So maybe I'll just go back to the old system. You know, I made those little bushings.
You gave it a little more play?
No, less play.
Oh, less.
I'm going to go back to it.
How do you open it up? How do you get to it? Oh, this is a
take apart plane, yeah. Take apart plane. So I thought if we had...
The engine is running well.
Oh, yeah. If we had a couple of, even some other people to fly this, you can't fly it, but the other people that can. See, I want to set it.
I thought it was going to rain today. That's why I didn't bother planning.
When I flew it, I flew fine, but it was touchier. I could move the handle in and take care of that. But Mike, I can see that Mike's thinking, what did he do? Put an ounce of tail weight in or something. So, but I have the bushings and I can change them right here at the field. So that's one thing good, and I'll get some more flights on this before the day is over. It's not. Why don't you go get your plane?
I don't know, especially if you're only going to be here.
No, we had a pretty productive session this morning. Although you can see it's leaf turning time. The leaves are orange. Leaves are green. The wind is starting to blow now, but we got the best hour or two in the morning. And I'm really zeroing in on something that I wasn't sure of in the past. In other words, we started out with a given amount of slop, which we always do. 3/32 rod, 1/8 hole. As it wore and the hole got bigger and bigger, it seemed like it got better and better and better. We put the little bushing in, which returned it back to that size. And it seemed like Mike had trouble flying the plane. I didn't notice a tremendous difference, but it seems like the plane got more sensitive. Now, the things we didn't get a chance to try yet, and we will in the next time we get to go, is the plane gets more sensitive as you take slop out. One of the things you can do is just move the lead-outs back a little bit to compensate, or shrink the handle down. But those are still tests we still haven't done. And we basically, a week from now, we're going to be going on vacation, 10 days, I think. And we have to shut the pond down. Boy, we really have had a great summer of being in the backyard, having breakfast and coffee out here. But you can see what's happening. It's already leaf raking time. Every other day or so, I have to rake up the leaves. And then the next day, the leaves are back down. So I'm going to go down. I'm going to change the bushing again to one that has just a little more slop. We have 3 bushings to try, and then we'll decide, I guess at the end of another session, if we can get Mikey out or somebody else. It's really important to get more than one person to fly the plane, because a lot of times what I do is I blanket over a problem. There'll be a problem where it does something and I just fly it there, and I don't realize I'm doing it, and all of a sudden somebody else flies the plane and goes, whoa. The other thing, it allows me to see the plane from outside the circle, to see the quality of turn, and if there's overturns, like when we were trying to help Keith Ferguson, if the plane is overturned, a lot of time the pilot is too busy to even see that. So I think we're zeroing in on having something that's going to be really worth having here before the season actually ends. Now, it's very easy. We can do it at the field. We can do it here. One screw and disconnecting the Raby rudder. That whole back end comes off the plane, and we can change the bushing. Very, very convenient to do this. And that's one of the nice things about a take-apart plane. It would be a little more inconvenient if you had a hatch, but certainly the way we work on this one is very, very easy to do.
It's just a question of loosening one screw here.
Like I said, you got to get the screw. You got to get the screw all the way out. You can't open it 2 threads and then take it out.
Now I got to make sure that I don't lose that little screw. Very convenient. This is a really nice way if you're going to have access to some of these take-apart features. There's really never a lot of oil in there anyway, but you could wipe it out anyway. Having a little, a little piece of plywood with some sandpaper on the back and a little hole for the wheel, just to keep the plane, when I'm doing this kind of work, it's difficult to keep the plane from rolling off the table. These are real handy to have. I just have sticky back paper on the back. What I've done in the past is when I want to make adjustments at the field, I use a wheel collar so I can do it at the field, take the push rod off, change the bushing. But then once I know how I want to have it set, or if there's a big contest coming and I don't want to be running the risk the wheel collar come loose, then I just solder a washer on the end of it. So I always have that little notch in the wire for the wheel collar, but being able to do it both ways, I just feel better once I'm done playing with my adjustments of having that washer soldered on there. Whenever I do a soldering job of any kind, I always have a little bit of tin foil underneath. In this case, it's easier to take the tail right off. So I've got the bushing changed now, and what I want to have is a permanent soldering joint there. Now you can see just by looking real quick, let's see if we can get a macro lens on this. You can see how much wear there is on that bushing. So what we'll do is we'll just replace this bushing. That'll be the easiest way. And by replacing that, we'll be back to having 3/32 and 1/8. And I think that'll take care of the little problem that I thought we had at the team trials where it got a little unstable, and I was trying to make up for it in other ways, but having this variable and being able to get in at it. Now can you imagine, just thinking of something, if you had a plane that you couldn't get in at that, either through a hatch or by taking it apart. This plane has probably 100 gallons of fuel through it now. Well, now the controls have more play than you want, and you've got to cut a hole or a hatch or something to repair it. Well, I just like this way a lot better. And I don't think in the future, unless there was some change or some special reason, I'd be wanting to make a plane that I can't get in at the controls. All you need is little bushings like this, and these bushings, you can make them thicker or thinner. If you have a little lathe, you can just take copper tubing, solder two pieces together and turn the outer one down. There's a lot of ways of doing it. Tom Hampshire made me these bushings years ago just for this purpose, so we could test them. And once I have the fit I want, and it always seems to be a 3/32 wire, an 1/8" bushing, or the same amount of clearance if you use, a lot of people like to use an 1/8" wire and a bigger bushing hole just because it gives you more wear area, probably would last a little longer, but the penalty would be it would be heavier. But by just being able to change this, we can go right back to our standard setting, just as if the plane were brand new. And boy, is that ever handy to have brand new controls. And if we want to go back, the thing is, if we like having that, for instance, as a plane got older and older, if it had more and more slop and got better and better, because what's really happening, it's allowing the flaps to move more. If that ratio worked out better for you, well, of course, we have other ratios on the horn, but it's always proven when I've gone back and forth with them, it always proved to be 1-to-1. The magic thing on most of these designs that I have concocted is 1-to-1, and the slop in the tail that you would normally get about of a 3/32 wire and an 1/8" bushing. And that just seems to be a formula that works for most people most of the time. Always baking soda and water, the solder defluxing agent, after you make one of these solder joints, which we hope is going to be good for another 2 years now. This is just baking soda and water, and I keep it in a sealed container. One little amount like that lasts forever, but anytime you use them, Stay Bright Silver solder, this is the best solder there is that I know of, Stay Bright Silver solder. We've also never had any of the problems with aluminum bolts on the tail, never even had to tighten one up. So we'll just assemble this back up, and really looking forward to getting back out to the field in the next couple of days if we can steal a day. You never know when you can steal a day around here, that's for sure.
And the next day I'm off.
I found it handy. I just took a priority box, put the soldering iron, the solder, the defluxing agent. It's the solder. Anytime I have to solder, I just go get this box, because usually I'd have the soldering iron here, this here, that here, this here, and it'd be, what a pain. This has proven to be a nice little handy little touch. We just leave that wherever we're going to do the soldering. And never forget to deflux. If you're using Stay Bright solder, and that is the best, do not forget to deflux it. Baking soda and water. We're all back in one piece, ready for the next test session. Sooner or later we're going to, well, you never really done trimming a plane out, but anytime you can make a little improvement, even to an older plane, it's really never done. I think Al Raby said, you're done trimming a plane the day you cut the lead outs and retire it. We'll put it in the Spitfire bedroom, one or the other. Just when I thought it was safe to use my shop again, my shop has been revoked. So these are the crackle finishes now?
Yeah, not finished. I'm still decoupaging, but
This looks like...
this is what the hatbacks looked like before.
Yeah, I know. We videotaped this.
Okay, so this is what it looks like now. And it's going to have an antique finish when it's done.
Crackle finish.
Uh-huh.
Very cute. Very cute.
Got 3 more processes before it's done.
I'm very impressed. But when do I get my workshop back? Any day now?
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow? I have to win the Nats! I need to win the Nats ahead of time, so I got one in the bank.
Number 5.
Forget it. This place again. Let's see what today's project is. Oh, the elephant's getting painted purple.
No, it's not purple.
Maroon.
Burgundy.
It's actually an Italian color, maroon. But it's a joy being married to a crafty woman. Every day I wake up, I don't know where the furniture's going to be, what's going to happen to it,
Or what
what color the elephant's going to be. Oh, man. Now, if I could challenge Karen's energy into making me bomber parts, I could get her to carve me nacelles or something right now. But I guess I won't be holding my breath on that one.
Nope.
When is this going to be done? Tomorrow? Today.
Two coats of this paint.
Those hat boxes look pretty nice, by the way. I put a coat of that clear on them. They look beautiful. Very nice. Very, very nice. Maroon.
Maroon it is.
And we get the bottom painted. This is one of Karen. You had this for a long time. You had this.
I've had this maybe 20 years.
She says it looks a lot like me. I don't know if that's true or not. The elephant, after a lot of work, Mr. Elephant is waiting for his maroon paint to dry, and she's going to put the gold rub and buff finish on it. While she's working on this, I had a couple little projects I wanted to work on, and I call these fun fill-in projects. That's something I don't want to take shop time away from. What are little projects I wanted to have? I wanted to do this. I was just waiting for a day that, well, a day like today that Karen's going to need the table in about an hour to do her rub and buff thing. And she's doing some decoupage. I wanted to do some experiments with wheels. One thing I truly believe this is the truth, is wheels are one of those things that if you can find some light wheels that'll do the job of the heavy wheels, boy, you've just saved critical weight. And what I did, what we're trying to do is make a set of wheels that pretty much looks like, these are the old, I don't remember what company makes these now. Anyway, they have this nice diamond tread pattern, it's very scale. There's only one problem, by the time you weigh the hubs and the wheels, they really are heavy. Well, we all know, and I've got a whole box of wheels. I never throw old wheels away, and there's a reason. We'll finish this off. I had all of these, what are meant to be, they're not foam, they're real rubber, and they used to advertise these as the lightest wheels in the world. Well, they've since not become. They've been replaced. These wheels, again, we worked with these. These are kind of a plastic. What happens, they don't stick to the ground real well, so as if you pull on a handle a little bit, the plane just ice skates sideways. Never liked those. Dave Brown's with a reel of choice for many years. They serve a lot of purposes, and now that they have these tread patterns, that's real nice. But what I wanted for the B25, I wanted a pair of these like scale wheels that are on there, and by the way, they are 4.3 grams each. So they're all 3 the same size. Of course, on the real plane, they would be larger if we were willing to pay the price. Well, I thought with all these wheel parts, I wanted to try to combine wheels and see if I could come up with something just a little more realistic. And these are the Hobby Lobby wheels, and these are by far, you can see the different sizes. These are the ones we have on a B25, the 1 3/4. They're 4.5 grams each. But notice that the 2 3/8 are only 5.8 grams. Well, but I don't like the look. The hubs never really made me real happy. That was the part of it I wasn't happy about. Dubro made these ultralight wheels for electric planes. The problem is they don't look real scale. They're not even lighter than the ones I already have. So Dubro makes a whole bunch of wheels, and I have every one of them. But see, I would like a hub, something like a spoked hub, just a little more realistic. This hub, I don't know. There's just something about it. When you spend 600 hours building a model and you have to put on wheels that you're not happy with, well, here's where this went. I saw these wheels and I said, geez, the last time I was down and I saw a real B25, that's what the wheels look like. That diamond tread was very scale. Again, I wasn't crazy about the hubs. So what I did, I ordered 5 pairs of these wheels. They're 2.5 inches, and I figured I'm going to see what I can do about coming up with my own hubs for these. Because usually the hubs are heavier than the wheels. The foam part is going to wear out regularly, especially on a big heavy model. So what I did, working with that premise, took some of my old wheels, weighed them up, got the lightest ones, of course, and I tried with a Dremel on various tools to try to carve different tread patterns. And I'm not real good about it, but I can get something like that on there. But this was just a test. But what I'm going to do is, I'm going to work on making some hubs. Now, I just happen to have these old wheels. These are the ones I wanted to have. These were the ones from the spare Miss Ashley gear. These were 2.5. So I want to take these off, and I want to replace the hubs and just see if I can come up with something a little bit more realistic. Again, this is what the hub looks like. And it's a ton, and you could probably grind this away and there's a million things you probably could do to this, but the easiest thing is if you can just find a replacement that's lighter. And fortunately, we have a hub that's already lighter. And these I just roughed out from a pair of Dave Brown wheels. And what I found was, if I could put a little bit of epoxy in there, now these are 3-inch wheels, and when I have both ends, what this is these are the Hobby Lobby. These are 3s, but I'm going to get the 2.5s. I'm going to get a couple of pairs of those too. But what I want to try, and I thought, well, why are we fooling around here? I'll get the ones with the treads that are already cut and put my own hubs in them. I have plenty of hubs. I mean, it's a lifetime of wearing these wheels out. And I can grind these down and paint them either white or silver or whatever, but it just turns out, if I can get I would definitely want to glue that in, but even without the glue, this turned out to be like something that I was amazed at that it fit. But again, from having a bunch of parts, even if you're doing a smaller model, a 35 ship, you'd be surprised at the difference in weight from the heaviest set of wheels. If you had this set of wheels on a plane and you wind up putting this set on, you'd save probably 2 ounces or something. So it's worth doing a little bit, especially when I have little gaps in time where I'm waiting for Karen to get her projects done and I can sit here with the scale. Time consuming. I can just see what they roughly would look like with treads. And again, you could always, I've heard that one of the things you could do is freeze these wheels in a freezer and then spin this in a drill press and just cut your own grooves. But the objective is we want to have by the end of the week or by the end of next week something just a little more realistic. And I think that when I get all these wheels in place, these diamond tread wheels and everything, I'm going to have something really nice when I'm all done. And what it'll amount to be, it'll be 1.5 grams heavier per wheel, but there'll be a lot more scale. So really looking forward to seeing that. That's Karen's latest project. How much did we pay for this?
$3.
Brodak dope. All Brodak dope. Airbrushed on. How are your airbrushing classes coming?
I'm learning.
From the master?
I'm learning.
Master Sen Windy, huh?
Yes.
I think that looks pretty good. That's Karen's first airbrush piece. She's trying to do it French provincial to
No, French country.
French country to match her daughter's bedroom that they did that crazy full finish on. Let's go see the elephant. I want to see how the elephant came out.
Okay.
This is the gold finish that you put on?
Yes.
Gold full finish. Mr. Elephant.
What do you think of him?
He looks great. Now this is going to Stacy's house?
Everything's going to Stacy's house.
I'm telling you. I think that's great.
He's probably dry, too.
Okay, well, we'll clean up as soon as he's done.
Oh, yeah, he's dry.
Can you touch it?
Yeah.
Let's rub and buff.
Yeah.
So there he is. Another great day in the Windy and Karen workshop. We got one last thing to show you. One last thing we did today.
He's looking like he's exposed. This looks like the most beautiful stretch. We saw it roughed up today, so who knows what's on.
Now, while the missus was making all these craft projects, what I did, I experimented. This is just strictly an experiment to see if I could make, with a Dremel tool, a reasonable looking tire. This is not the real one. I just wanted to see what and I could get it down to 4 grams. And I like the idea you can look right through it. I think that's a pretty realistic tire. In fact, it's more realistic than I thought it would be. I put some silver paint on the outside. I don't know whether that's going to be as he drops it. See, the idea with the whole thing is, first off, the tire that's on here is too small, and it's not what a scale tire would look like. That hub is nothing like. This is a lot more like what should be on there. Look at the difference. But I want to get the tires for the back, and do a landing gear change altogether, and then of course make sure I don't have any of the angles wrong for the takeoff and landing. But even a little thing, years after you make a plane, a little thing like this, a little upgrade, I think that'll really be nice. A totally scale tire would be 2.5. This is 2 3/8. After I got done doing all my grinding and cutting, and of course I just wanted to see if it was going to be doable, because I wouldn't want to have the diamond tires on the back and no diamond on the front. But when I looked at the book, the B25 book, B25s definitely use those diamond treads, so another little detail touch we got on a day that basically we did more crafting than anything else. Now I got a couple hours today. What my plan was, and we've done this to the original A26 wing, but I want to sand in the dihedral angle, get the bell crank in, and get the center joined if I can, and that can be drying while I do other things around the shop today, because this will be a very busy day. But just getting this started early in the morning and getting the joint done. Remember, what's real important, exactly like the tail, is to get half of the angle in each block. Block up each tip, get that 90-degree block to get a nice angle on it, make sure everything fits perfectly. Do a dry fit, make sure our center lines all line up. In fact, this one we sanded. For this one we have a center line, and this one we sanded off. I have to put the center line back on. Those center lines need to join up very accurately before we actually make the epoxy joint. What we're doing, we need to have a center line no matter what operation we're on. This one's got the center line on it already. But what will happen as we final sand this out, there's a chance you'll sand some of this away. But whether it's lining up the tips or the nacelles, we want to have that center line on there. Now the one that's sanded out, let me go through how I go about putting it back on. Relatively easy. You can see we sanded this one off. But what I want to do is pick up the little holes on both ends. You can see the little holes where John has cut the cores. That actually is the center, the physical center, because he flips the template. These are made with a half template. So if I can line that up, get that right on alignment, that gets me the center line going around both corners. Just by getting our short ruler to go right across the center of these two dots, And it won't matter what kind of wing you have, working off a center line for me is an absolute must if you're looking to make nice, accurate stuff. Now I can just go back over the original line. Now the trick is when you get to the end, go around the corner just a little bit. Because what you do when you flip this over is connect the two dots. All of these two dots go right around the corner. Now we have a center line back where we had sanded it off from block sanding this. One of the tricks I use, and it's a good little trick, because if you're working alone, Les isn't here, you can't use somebody else's help. If you have a helper, of course, it's the best of all worlds. You have this coming up around just a little bit. Now I want to get the long 48-inch ruler, and I want to basically connect the dots. But because I'm working alone, the problem is going to be that I need to tape this in position. Get it lined right up, and do the same thing down at the other end. Even on a trailing edge, having a little piece of tape there just stabilizes it just enough. You don't need to get underneath the tape right now. You can just connect the two lines you already have. Once we take the tape off, now I can just carefully take this off. And if it slips, you can just connect it with a small ruler. And now we've reestablished a very accurate center line on a part, because one of the next things we're going to have to do is connect the two center lines together. I don't want to have the wing that it's got any unnecessary twist in it. Now we have both panels now with a good center line on both panels. Now we know which is the inner panel because we've relieved all the material by the tip. So we want to set this in position. And the next step, now we have everything center line. The next step is going to be I want to raise the height of the panel out at the tip, the amount that we're going to put the dihedral in the wing, which in this case is 1 inch. So I'll get an inch block, and then I can just carefully get this as flat as possible, a nice flat joint, get the two joints together, get the belt crank prepared, and get this joined together so while this is drying I can be working on other things. I like to let this dry. I don't like to do this with 5-minute glue where I have to rush and rush and rush. We have the inboard tip jacked up for the dihedral. Now I want to get this end, I want to get this, hold it perfectly steady, and just carefully dress this edge off. I want to go one ice shaving at a time, because I don't want to take material any more off than I have to, and I don't want to start making an angle in it. I want to start and make sure I'm not changing this angle front to back. I made up, when I did the original A26 wing, I made up another sanding block, but this one I think is far more accurate. I want to just make sure I don't make this move. I want to get this right out on the end. This is one of the things that requires a little bit of just timing, just to get each panel, because to get a perfect joint, if it's off even a little bit, it's going to really not be as strong as it could and not be as accurate as it could. So like lining up a tail in a plane, I want to have this a very, very accurate. Now, I also have to make sure when I do the other wing to reverse this situation so I don't have one end and one up and one down. This is the inner panel. It'll be right. Raising up. Now, a real good way to know if you have the whole thing smooth, and I've done this before, and this is just when you're really not sure you have the whole thing. Put dots on the whole side. Yeah, we don't want to take any more than we have to off. As soon as you see you're hitting the dots, or any of the dots that are staying on, you know. Okay, we've got just one on the bottom. Still have one down there. Got one here. Okay. Okay, now we'll just reverse this, do the other panel, and then we'll be ready to do a dry fit. Doing this, I want to make sure I get as much of the dust away from our joint as possible. Ooh, I just took a chunk of wood away. I'll put a little piece of scrap in there. I'll make a little patch, but right now I don't have to worry about that. I just have to reverse this and get the other panel lined up. That looks like it's going to be real good. And once I get I'm happy with this side, then I need to do what I call a dry fit, and put the panels together and see that I'm not seeing light in between any place on the seam. Have the part just taped in to make sure I have a joint. Now there's a couple of spots I want to dress off. I want this joint to be perfectly tight. Then what I'll do is flip it over, tape the back, and I'll have it basically taped together so I can look at, do I want to find any high spots in here, anything I want to dress off. And see, as I get the alignment, now what I want to do, I want to make sure, see how the center lines aren't lined up exactly? The center lines are lined up, and I have a pretty good joint in the front. Happy with that joint. The next thing is going to be to locate the bell crank pivot in here, take out the notch, cut away as much of the foam as necessary, make the hole for the push rod, because the bell crank will have to be temporarily tack glued in that outer panel when we do the final joint. The bell crank and the lead-outs we previously made up for the plane. We needed to put a special rod longer because the bell crank is going to sit up higher in the wing. So what I need to do is cut a notch now in the wing, and I need to cut it exactly half of the bell crank throw. The reason for that is, and that's about 3/8 of an inch, the reason for that is that when the bell crank is in mid-throw, that's when we want it to be in neutral, not off to either end, right in the middle. So we can mark, and we'll have the pivot right on the spar itself. So let's just mark out the amount. We need 1/8 thickness. And then what we need to do is take a slot, cut that slot right through, and we could do that with a Zona saw. Way to work as a guide here, just so we don't chew up the wing with the Zona saw. And we want a nice tight, well, not a tight fit, but a press fit on a wire if possible. That's about right. Now, you can just real carefully Have this little tool, it's like sticky back, I don't know what it is, carbide. And that's the slot that we need to melt. See this? Chicky, you're in my way. And now I need to cut some of the foam away so we have some clearance for this bell crank.
Now we know we're going to need to make clearance for the push rod. A lot of this is just trial and error until we find how much we need to remove. Before we go any further, the bell crank has to be permanently mounted. So I want to mount the bell. Why do I keep wanting to melt the bell crank? Mount the bell crank. I want to mount it off center, of course. That makes up for our vertical CG. Now, if I were to do that, it puts too much of a cut in the wing. That's one of the problems. I had also thought at one time of putting the push rod underneath, but I don't want to have a bend in it. So the compromise that I arrived at, the same as with the B25, is not to have the cut go any further than that. And right about there is where that's going to wind up being. So what that allows me to do, allows me to plot out where the push rod is going to exit. And we could remove some of that. I'm going to guess that that's about how much has to come off. But again, these are just rough cuts. These aren't the final cuts, and when you're all done, you always wind up having to take some more off. Now it just happens, this thin Zona saw, if I take about that amount, that's a good starting point until I bottom out the saw blade. Now, just for purposes of reference, this part of the wing, right where my hand is now, is going to do all the work. This part back here isn't doing much at all except holding things together. But the stress, the span loading stress, is going to be on the high point of the wing, right where the bell crank mount is, and that's where we'll have most of the structure and glass. The foam holds the shape, but the glass is what's going to take the load. Also I have the two cuts. I have to transpose this out into the inner wing panel. But none of this material, people think this weakens the wing. Well, if it does, all my planes would have already folded. And only some of them have, not all of them. Okay, now we have, well, we got to get some of this material out of here too. But we have the hole for the push rod, the bell crank line. Now we need to just get this same amount into the other wing and cut some of that foam around the foam spar. So make sure we have a full rotation on the bell crank. So I really just need to cut a nice big chunk of that. Now, here's another tip. Anytime you cut foam, you don't want to cut 90-degree angles. You want to cut curves. It just softens that you don't get a stress riser in there, so that there's less stress on the center of the wing, and that center of the wing does take a beating, there's no doubt about it. We need to transpose out where that push rod exit is going to be, and then we'll be ready to join the wing. So I mean by kind of a half moon. I think that just lets more of the foam, you don't wind up getting a stress riser there. And just take the points off here, cut that push rod trough, and we're ready to go.
Again, this is not a real critical thing. We're going to have to open this up for sure after we put the back end on the push rod. But just for starters, we know this is a good place to start. We know this is just about where this needs to be. Now, before I actually do the joining of the wing, I'll do another dry fit. Make sure I haven't distorted anything or changed anything, or that there's any interference, because it'll be easier to get these interferences taken care of now rather than before the wing is joined. And I think just to make myself a little bit extra time here, I'll use alphatic instead of epoxy. The alphatic gives me about an extra 15 minutes working time, because I really want to babysit this as much as possible. Let's just see, yep.
Okay, and what I did, I marked off how much extra wire needed to be cut off. Made sure I had plenty of clearance for the throws. Oops. Now I want to just take this, take it over to the Dremel, clip off all the extra wire. I always put some knurls on the wire, some of these little, just so the epoxy gets a grip in it.
I need to put the bell crank in. I just have a little piece of scrap here. Make sure it's kind of a press fit. Okay, that'll be fine. Cut this in half. Just has to be a scrap piece, nothing fancy. And that'll just hold the bell crank in while our 5-minute epoxy, we're going to put one drop of 5-minute epoxy on each side. The thing I found, in this case I'm using 5-minute, and I get it from Brodax. And the reason is, we know Brodax sells a lot of this stuff. It doesn't sit on the shelf for year after year after year. And when I get the epoxy, it's always nice and fresh. I never get crystallized stuff like I've gotten from other manufacturers where it may sit in a warehouse for a year. Both the CA and the epoxy I try to get as much as I can from Brodax because I know it's fresh. Again, the only thing this is doing is just holding the bell crank temporarily in place. So I don't need to build a bridge here. One drop of this will do. My original goal was, before I go away on vacation, was to have this wing in one piece, and it certainly looks like we have a good chance of getting that done. Again, those little notches, I don't know if you can see these little notches, they tend to fill with epoxy and give it a better tooth. Fresh epoxy, boy, how many times without mentioning names, I've gotten other brands of epoxy, and a week later it's crystallized. Very frustrating. Okay, now since this isn't a structure joint, it's more of a convenience joint. I want to spend my time getting a good alignment here. My little pieces, and I'll put this in a vertical mode for now. Waiting for that epoxy to dry. I'm going to get a little bit of my Pj1 Chain Lube and just get some grease on all the moving parts. That'll be the last time I can conveniently get in there and get some grease on the controls. So what happens to Pj1? This is Pj1. It's made from motorcycle chains. Now the reason I like to use it, watch what happens. It comes out like a foam, like a liquid. It penetrates into every crevice of everything. Now if you wait, and this is stuff after it sits for an hour, it turns into very thick grease, but it's already in those places
It starts out as a liquid, it's capillary, and it turns into a grease. So right now, while we have that wing dry in there, it's a good time to grease it. Pj1, this is probably, I've had one can for 100 years here. What's nice about it, for about $8 you can buy this in any motorcycle store, and you'll never have a control system wear out. You don't want to do is spray this around paint. It can be tough on paint because there are chemicals in here that are not conducive to having paint stick. And what happens once you get some of this on something, what happens, it's almost impossible to get it off. Get out of there, crazy bird. But it doesn't take much of this and you'll be not only having smooth controls, but it will be lubricated for life. I want to join this with Tight Bond. I also took a little container of water. The purpose of the water is, what I'm going to do with each section, number one, it slows down the drying just a little bit. I just want to wet it, not even really wet it, just dampen it really. If you had a little sponge, I guess you could do it just as well. Again, if I had two people here, if I had a helper, I'd go with the epoxy, but this gives me really a good hour before it's really dry. And I find when I'm working alone like this, a little extra drying time, especially on this because I want to for all purposes babysit it. I've seen people that mask off the foam so they don't get any glue on the foam. Well, not sure how much you save by doing that. I don't think it's enough to really be head and shoulders. We do it when we do the leading and trailing edges. I want to get a good amount of glue on there. Then where it does work on the foam, just wipe it off so there isn't a lot on the foam. I can't imagine that any wing structure is going to be held together with styrofoam. If you're waiting for that, you better be building a park flyer. Anyway, the phone call I had last night, just worth mentioning, Sergio has found what he thinks is a lead for a motor that's going to be appropriate for our, hope I can get this before we go away on vacation too. I'm really, really excited about that possibility. Now what I've done is just leave the aliphatic right on the edge of the wood. And with just that little bit of water, it's going to give me even a little more dry time, which is always to my advantage. Now do the same thing to the other side, and then we're ready to join these together. What I always try to do too is an operation like this, or something similar to this, where it has to be accurate. I'd like not to have any interruptions, if possible. That doesn't mean the phone, usually the minute you mix epoxy, you can guarantee the phone will ring, but it would be nice if, for instance, in our case, you could do this while the shop isn't too busy, or we don't have too many people over, or if we get somebody over, that's somebody that we can use them for a helper. It's really, there's a lot of operations in a plane, like putting a wing in a fuselage or things similar to that, boy, if you only have a helper, it makes it so easy. Try not to get too much on the lead outs here. Big advantage of this, on end grain, you do get a beautiful bond if you just put one drop of water or just moisten, and I don't mean get it wet, just moisten it. You can actually see the aliphatic drop in there. We had a guy in our club not long ago, haven't seen him in a while, Mike Speedalier was his name, and he used to get joints. He used to wet down the wood with a sponge, built the whole plane with aliphatic, and I think he was into some kind of furniture making or some kind of an operation where he really did know his stuff. He wasn't a real hobbyist, as many of us are. And boy, did he have wood joints on his plane. I mean, he had planes, and he'd never paint them. They were always clear, so you could kind of show off the wood joints.
kind of rub it in, I guess. Anyway, we're going to be ready now. Since we've done a dry fit, we know we have a real good chance at getting this to line up on the first shot, taking away all the material that we really didn't want to have in the way. Okay, rid of the water. Now I need to push the lead outs down through the other panel. This is where if you had the wingtip glued on, you'd be saying, "Winnie, help." Isn't it nice when you don't have a helper? What is it catching on? Oh, you son of a gun. Come on. Making a tricky train to go in there and get that out. Of course, we could put it, just lay it down. There we go. Stand position. Lead outs out the wing. Here's a real good tip, a real good trick once you get them out. Piece of tape on there. Just temporary. Keeps them from falling back in while you're working on this. Now we want to just get some tape on. Now once I have that, 2 pins, one on each leading edge, trailing edge. This just kind of helps hold it in alignment temporarily. Now we can jack up this side here. You can tell I'm prepared. Makuna Matata, be prepared. That just jacks it up a little more than the dihedral brake, so we can put this under tension. Any glue comes out the top, give it a wipe. Now we can start putting what I call rubber bands on. And these are tension. This is 1-inch wide tape, not 3/4. Start at the high point, stretch it, drop it down. Now the original piece we put on now is not in tension, so we can get rid of that. Any glue that comes out from in there, you can see the glue. Let me show this on a close-up. Because this is under tension, it's acting like a rubber band. The pin is just holding us roughly in place. Nice pieces of tape about 1 foot long. Put one side down. Get it down right up to the joint, then stretch the other piece. Get it down with your thumb, and then work back to the middle of the wing. That's the way you can create, it acts like a rubber band. Same thing on the trailing edge. You just want to build some tension. And no matter what foam wing, no matter what design you're using, this is an excellent way to do it. Now, anytime you're out of alignment, you just pull the tape off, move it, twist it, and this is why having this extra work time is so nice. Right now, having, instead of 15 or 20 minutes like you have with epoxy, having an hour to cruise here, very, very convenient. Now I'll get one more on here and then flip it. Looks like the joint is going to be real accurate. Now, the reason I did this side first is because I want to push that down just a tad. There we go. Get that joint as nice as we can. Now when I flip this over, it's going to be like a bird flapping its wings. But now it's up in the air, and now you can see we're under a little bit of tension. So the first piece I put on there Have to really be careful now not to just snap it, because the only thing holding it now is the glue. So with the first piece on, just by pressing it down, I create the tension. We have one piece. Oh boy, what a joint. Even Les would be impressed if he was here. Joe Adamusco asked me why we just don't make a built-up wing. Well, probably just to save time, and just because I think the scale. Look, I didn't want to have silk span on the. I didn't want open bays. I want it to be more realistic. Anyway, you can see what I'm doing is just putting these strips in tension. Now if you had a standard, now I'm stretching them, putting the two thumbs down. If you had a standard foam wing with no dihedral, this would be pretty, you'd side it and just tighten the side that's loose. But with a dihedral one, all we want to do is see that we have the amount, the 1 inch under each tip dihedral that we're striving for the look that we hope is going to be as scale as we can make it without making it an unflyable or untrimmable or unbuildable plane. Now, you for all purposes can just keep putting tape on this. There's no end to the amount of tape you can put on. Check the joint. Center lines are perfect. Basically what we have to do now is just kind of when I say babysit, watch it, look at it. Have a cup of coffee now, but a good hour, maybe 2 hours, let that dry. Once that, or even overnight if we get busy in the shop or we have company or whatever. Having that in place, nice and tight like that, is really nice. Now another thing I could do, maybe I will do it in fact, while this is drying, I can just, same thing with the I don't need to do it on video, with the tight bond, get the wingtips put in place so that all these joints, and then probably just let it dry overnight would be the easiest way. Or an end grain, just dip your finger in water, not soaking wet, just slightest bit damp is fine. Just makes for an excellent joint when you do that. And I think the most reasonable thing here is because we're not rushing this project. We certainly don't need any more bombers. We have one functional bomber, so if we have to invade Normandy or something, we have enough bombers on staff. Invade Muncie. And I want to get that same thing I just said. I just get most of the glue off, even though this is the outer tip, just so we don't have a lot of glue oozing up through the joint. You can see what I've got here is just around the edge, and I'll do the same thing to the outer tip. Something nice too is when aliphatic joints are nice and tight, and it's not true if they're loose, when they're really tight and there's a very thin amount of glue or glue seam, it sands out beautifully. When you have big gloppy things where the joints are relatively large, then that's really not true. And one of the things we really want to have on this, because it's a scale plane, is that you don't see the balsa joints. And when we do the ink work, we don't want to have to disguise any more joints than we have to. Now we just need to get the old wingtip. Piece of tape.
Nothing high-tech about this. Hold it up there. Two of these nice little surgical pins. Line up the center. And do the same stretching trick. This is a nice place to have a helper, by the way, right here. So you can stretch the tape a little easier, but whenever you carve a block, what tends to happen, it tends to lose its shape some, and it wasn't a perfect match here for the wingtip. So what I always do is, these pieces aren't even glued in, they're just in here, and I can push them further to the back to spread it out. And when we're all done, we'll just shake the wing and they'll probably fall out. They can come out the bell crank opening. And because they're a little bit, they're under, see, this one's not even under tension anymore. It could be that we only need one. We just need one in this case. Just a little bit of tension. I don't want to glue it in because I want it to disappear. Now I can do the same thing with the glue. See, otherwise this joint on the tip, it would be a different airfoil, a very small amount, granted. But if we can kill some of that asymmetry, that would be nice. The water is an excellent little trick to help this whole thing happen. Now what we need is a temporary piece of tape here, as we always do. Notice I have a piece of tape on the lead outs, because if they slide into the wing, it could be a nuisance. And this is, it's usually easier just to get the first one on. Just to go back a little bit. Now this one is delicate, so I can't really lean on it too much like I could on the other one. Look at the tip. Tape on. I want to see that I have no step in the joints. Last thing I want to do before this even dries up, well, make sure this is nice and straight. Because again, I'm going to babysit this. I don't want this just to assume nothing will change. As soon as I'm happy that this is going to dry, I'll take the tape off, wrap the lead outs, crimp them, then they can't slide back into the wing. Now with them crimped, they can't go back into the wing. And this is just going to be, I guess we're near the end of today's work session. We just let that whole thing dry overnight. What do you think, Chicky? Let it dry overnight? Let it dry overnight, he says. Then we'll come back and work on this, and the next time we get to work, knowing that all of those joints now, this whole thing can be final sanded out with 400, that'll really be nice. Now it's nice to know that tomorrow or the next day, or whenever we get to work on it again, we basically have one of the major parts of our 826 in the bank. Well, I can't wait till the day we have two of them sitting down here. We're going to have to make a double-decker rack, a triple-decker rack, or I don't know. I just have to buy a bigger house and move to California or something. Hey, today what I figured on doing, rather than sanding, because we have a really short amount of time, don't have a lot of time to spend, I wanted to try to at least make up one of the elevators here and decide how exactly we're going to make them. Try to get that part figured out or in the bank right now. And when we get the plan down, we've been leaving a plan up here on the wall. Get the plan down here on the table, pick out the wood we're going to use, and try to make up at least one of the prototype elevators. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to make this up, or I get at least one of them made up so far, of course we got the stab is done, because Mike Costello, who's making the other 826, is going to be hopefully building his tail in the next week or so, and then we can compare. He can borrow my stab, actually take it home. He's already made flat tails like this. So I want to lay out what I hope is going to be the prototype of the elevators, and then from that Mike can take the plan and the real elevator back, and he can make his, so he'll be not far behind us. And after that we're going to be getting ready to make up the plug for the body and the mold for the body. So this project's really going ahead nice and quick. Believe it or not, this is the parts that we cut off from making the foam wings. This is that real nice sheeting that we had for the foam wings. And conveniently enough, we have 4 of them. And from this, I'm going to piece together what will amount to be the skins. But the first thing I have to do is make an elevator skin pattern. Okay, now by having a pattern, we already have the tip blocks cut already. Now I can take this and I want to make up 4 skins. And I think I can squeeze them. If I really play my cards right, I may be able to squeeze the whole thing right out of the sheeting that, well, maybe not. Again, that's why I never throw any of this good wood away. It's so hard to get wood of this quality. I'm going to get some of them. Now, if I knew by tracing this out, I could have gotten a little bit more. I really can't. Maybe it was false alarm. Alright, if I wanted to, I guess I could put a joint in them. Anyway, I need to make up, starting thing, 4 skins. All 4 of the skins cut. What I want to do is just make sure they're all exactly the same. In this case, we got one that isn't. Now, I'm going to use this wood that I had, and this is a good tip. This wood was left over from the wing skins. This will be good wood to make up ribs and little parts. But I'd never throw that good wood away. I'm going to just dress all these skins off. There's that block. I want to start with these all being roughly the same size anyway. And then we have, the first thing is figure out how we want to jig one end of this up. Because there is a taper in the elevator, so we want to make sure, if you build a taper elevator on a flat table, you build a warp in. What I want to do is just jack the back end up. We have to kind of figure it out. It's going to be a 1/16 minus a half minus a 1/16, 3/8 of an inch. So I have to get a strip of 3/8 to lay out here to act as a jig. Put some tape on. This is a piece of 3/8 scrap. I want to trace out with a 90-degree triangle where all the ribs are going to reside. Also need to just make note of where the hinge pockets are going to be. Now, the easiest way I know to do this is just put a dot, since we have the plan accurate, a dot on each side, trace it right down on the skin, and then we'll have to estimate what the rib is, make a pattern of course, see how they fit. And by the time I get this done, I want to have all the ribs traced in place on this half of the elevator.
Then the next thing is going to be to kind of jig this up in place. We're going to make this oversized so some of the front gets trimmed off. A template for a rib at a 64th plywood. I need to know the end dimension, and that I've already gotten down on there. I also know that the stab thickness, we want to make a mirror image of this, and that's exactly 1/2 inch. So we have a 1/2 inch down on a table. Now what we want to do is subtract a 1/16 from each side. And that'll give us, let's assume we're going to have a 3/8. We want to have an 1/8 inch in the back. So I need to know what a 1/4 would be. Very scientific. This is going to be the center line. The two pieces are going to match. So that's now going to be the dimension I want. Now I pretty much can just connect the dots here, and I'll have a template, a rough template anyway. Like I said, I'll answer the phone. Get up this rough template, and again, I'm always roughing things out here at this point in time. Now when we had Dave Downey doing ultra accurate plans for us, of course we had a lot less rough and a lot more accuracy, but for right now this is going to be good enough. Alright, just keep in mind, the taper has been set in here, and I'm going to just try to make, let's see, we need 12 ribs. This is more or less of a prototype. Then we're going to cut the front off or the back or both to get the exact shape we want. Okay, so I need, from this, and I'll mark what this is, I need to make up 13